what went wrong? And by the way, I'm just going to tell you in advance, it's not like I'm coming up with any new explanations of why this team's so bad. To me, the number one thing is, even though I think Bill DeWitt, as I've been preaching, is certainly really the responsibility starts at the top, and he's let this thing slide. But when I was putting these notes together, I kind of listed that down near the bottom, but I don't mean it that. In fact, I don't know. It doesn't matter where I list it. But I was looking at 5 things, the obvious things that we need to be reminded of. It actually, why are the Cardinals so bad at the All-Star break this season? Well, it actually started in the offseason because of this bizarre overconfidence by ownership and management. They made only one move during the offseason. That was the Contreras move, 5-year deal. For some reason, John Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt thought the roster was all set, ready to dominate, even though the Cardinals, if you include the 2 postseason losses to the Phillies, a Cardinals team that had Goldschmidt at his peak, Arenado at his peak, Albert Pujols in an amazing farewell of 24 homers, all these Gold Glove guys. The Cardinals last year were only 45-43 against non-division opponents last season. But they thought they were a new dynasty was forming or something. So this was the classic example of the Cardinals overrating and overvaluing their own players. And so that complacency, that arrogance is a substantial factor that set up where this team is right now. There's no question about it. That to me is the biggest factor about specifically this season. Then you go down to the next obvious thing, dreadful starting pitching, demoralizing starting pitching. And again, this is on Mozeliak. By extension, DeWitt. So you come into 2023 with returnees, Miles Miklasz, Jack Flaherty, Steven Matz, and 41-year-old Adam Wainwright, who was collapsing at the end of last year performance-wise. No upgrades at all were made to this group, leaving this team to rely on a vulnerable rotation that is among the worst in the major leagues. They were hoping for the best-case scenario. John Mozeliak was, if we think – DeWitt said this a bunch of times, we think Jack Flaherty's going to be healthy and he's going to be like the 2019 Jack, and we're really thrilled with Miles Miklasz. We really were happy with the way Waino performed last year. He's an innings eater. He's an established pitcher. Listen, Steven Matz didn't have the year he wanted, but we think he'll be much better in 2023. They talked themselves into the best case scenario on all these guys, and the only guy who was coming back was Jordan Montgomery, who they got late last season, and that was the one guy they didn't have to say. They didn't have to spread false optimism, but they spread it, and they came into this season with the terrible rotation. The smartest fans knew it. The medium smart fans knew it. The lower intelligence media fans, all of us knew it. Everyone knew it except the people that actually make decisions on the Cardinals. And then you look at where they are, 25th in ERA, 25th in quality start percentage, 27th in win probability added, and they got a 6.35 ERA in the first inning. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, put them in an early hole. That's all right. We can overcome that all the time. When they get a quality start, they're 21-4. That underlines how important starting pitching is. The problem is, of course, they only have 25 quality starts near the bottom of the majors. Then if you want the perfect storm, you got a bullpen that's devastated. In part, a factor certainly is they've had to carry so many innings because of the bad starting pitching. No team at the break had blown more save opportunities than the Cardinals, 21. 28 leads overall they've squandered. They've lost 10 games when taking a lead into the 7th inning. Their bullpen ERA is 5.56 since the start of June. And for the season, 29th in win probability added, only Oakland is worse. So you got a bad rotation. And, what the heck? Let's also go with a bad bullpen.
Oh, boy.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can pretty much stop the analysis right there. You can't. Now listen, the Reds are overcoming a starting rotation. There's nothing great about it. There's great young talent, but I'm talking about in real time. Those guys get bopped around pretty good, but the Reds don't throw away games. and they score runs because they don't have to rely on homers. They get them. They don't have to rely on them because they have crazy speed, and they're bold, and they're fearless. And, De La Cruz the other day, I was watching that game at the time. I'm like, what? He stole second base. Then, like, on the next pitch or two, he steals third. And then the Milwaukee reliever falls asleep on the mound, turns his back on De La Cruz. And he stole third base and home on basically without a pitch being thrown. I mean, it's just crazy. And that's an extreme example, but that whole team has that mentality. So I'll get to that in a minute, but you can overcome one thing. It's not ideal to have to overcome a starting rotation that isn't real consistent, right? You can't do that and overcome a terrible bullpen. It's just not going to happen. Now, maybe there'll be some improvement. I don't know. And this brings me to one of the things I've been hollering about for a long time. I continue to holler about it. I'm glad that I was the first to holler about it. I had the way ahead of the curve on everybody. I was just sat there all season wondering, how come? Why? I don't understand why there's not more attention put on their defense and base running. Okay. I'm glad you all caught up. I'm insufferable, aren't I? The collapse of the fundamentals. Jose Akendo's got to be shaking his head. And the late, great instructor, George Kissel's probably, if I know him, he's probably cursing from the ballpark in the sky. The Cardinals ranked 30th in the majors in defensive efficiency, converting only 66% of the balls hit and play into outs. Last year they were 12th in that area. Now they're 30th. And listen, Jim, this one I thought up for Jim Hewer. I mean that. In 2021 and 22 combined, both seasons combined, over those two seasons, the Cardinals were credited with 148 defensive runs saved, a total that I don't think was matched by any other team over two seasons. But at the very least, the Cardinals like second or third. But the point is, over two seasons before this one, 148 defensive runs saved. You know where they are this year? Minus 18. Now,
oh wow!
You go from saving 148 runs over two seasons, and you're minus 18 in that category this year, with a pitching staff that doesn't get many strikeouts and the ball's always in play. Who the hell put that team together? I wonder. And who's setting the defense? I wonder, because they never are lined up right, or I should say they're lined up wrong too many times. So, Jim.
My word, minus 18?
If you have a bad rotation and you have a bad bullpen and your starters don't strike out many people at all, they're down near the bottom of that. The bullpen was earlier, but their strikeout rate the last 6 weeks or so is in the toilet. So let's see. We'll have bad starting pitching, bad bullpen, a lot of balls in play. You know what? Let's just throw it in a bad defense, too. See how that all works out. Like, when you have a defense this bad with this kind of pitching, the word that comes to mind is ruinous, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it.
It's almost like you wonder if I were a feverish, having the night sweats with all these crazy dreams bouncing around inside my head, someone would think that it was like they're throwing games or something, and I'm being facetious. But, I mean, that's how crazy it is that you could actually be this bad in how you put your team together. But not only that, how you set your defense and what you've done to your defense and all the fundamentals that have just gone right into the deep bottom. You just couldn't even make this up. It's so ridiculous. So then you have the base running, and in terms of the bases taken rate, 28%. That ranks 28th in the majors. Last year, that was way up there around 4th. So that's for the people that always there are some apologists out there. Well, it's not Ollie's fault. Okay, so why do you have a manager and coaches when the fundamentals are completely just turned to manure? What they're innocent bystanders? They what really? What do you mean none of this is their fault? I hear apologists saying this all the time or implying it. Hey, we all know that Marmol was given an inadequate, inferior roster to work with that had a lot of flaws. I get that. Starting pitching ain't his fault. He's tried to do what he can with the bullpen. I think the pressure, and also the fact he's got so many worn-out relievers, I think it leads him into making some decisions that blow up. He overly relies on mediocre guys like Andre Palante. He makes mistakes down there, don't get me wrong. But there is no way you can give him a pass on this terrible collapse of the defense and the base running. So you just can't. This is why managers and coaches are there. And anyone who says otherwise, man, you don't know your Cardinals history, because we whined about this during the entire Mike Matheny years, except for maybe 1 or 2 years was okay. And Mike Schilt got hosannas because he came in at the All-Star break in 2018 and he cleaned it up. He made him much better right away. Oh, but the managers and the coaches don't matter, huh? Wow. Finally, let's tie it all together. This is the fifth thing why they're as bad as they are. I did cover Marmol without naming him as his own category, because I do think we tend to just go overboard and always blaming the manager. I try to attribute blame in the right places, like where it actually deserves to go. With Marmol, it's the deterioration of their fundamentals. DeWitt's allowed his team standards to fall. He's abiding over an operation of a roster that's inadequate. It was inadequately constructed, too many mistakes, too many holes. It's easy to blame Mo for the pitching shortfall, and the criticism is absolutely warranted. I said it's absolutely warranted. But as I mentioned very briefly earlier, last thing we'll say in this segment, keep in mind, Mozeliak does not have the freedom to do whatever the hell he wants to do. DeWitt's got to sign off on everything, and he's involved in every decision. And he is the ultimate boss, and he either says yes or no. As one team source theorized to me, Mozeliak, one of the reasons he's not as aggressive as he should be, there's two. He got burned by that Ozuna trade. The other one is that some of his free agent spending has gone bad, and DeWitt lets him hear about that, and because he also knows DeWitt's going to use the veto if something is too expensive. So, again, that fits into what I've told people for years. Those two work as a team. It's not one or the other. It's both of them. Except Bill DeWitt ultimately has the final say.